If you haven't watched part 1 of Urusei Yatsura English dub history, please do so. We left off talking about the many Urusei Yatsura TV series dubs, including a short-lived one from North Carolina, a parody one from England, a non-existent one from Alaska, and a mostly lost one from Hong Kong. Today, we are going to look at Urusei Yatsura's film dubs. Oh boy, this one is a doozy. But we're also going to talk about one more dub. Stay tuned until the end because I interviewed a few special guests for this video. You absolutely don't want to miss this. Speaking of guests, Abhi from the Cartoon Cypher is joining me once again.
Hey guys, sorry it's been a while, but I'm still alive. Been researching unions and editing for my boss's gacha game addiction.
But first, a few corrections and updates from last time. During the discussion of the Animego dub, we misheard this line as hot people.
It's hot people!
Ataru is actually saying pod people, which makes a lot more sense. I mistakenly said during the analysis of the Omni Productions dub that Russell Waite plays Master Roshi in the Hong Kong dub of Dragon Ball. Master Roshi is played by Dave Bridges. I believe I mistook the two because they both played Ten Shinhan in that dub. Waite confirmed he played this role in a YouTube comment, while other sources confirmed Dave Bridges also played Ten Shinhan. So pretend I said Ten Shinhan instead of Roshi. Now for the big series of updates. A fan named Diego reached out over DM on Twitter with a lot of helpful info about various dubs. First, he got in contact with Martha Ellen Sensini, the voice of Lum in the Southwind dub of the TV series. She said her voice for Lum was a combination of her own voice and inspiration from Lum's original voice actress, Fumi Hirano. Additionally, Diego spoke to Andrea Kwan, and she believes that Omni dubbed the entire series, which makes it suck even more that 99% of this dub is lost media. How is there only one mostly full episode available out of almost 200? Well, here's to hoping one day more of this dub is found. Thanks, Diego, for all this info. Another big contribution to our updates comes courtesy of ZP Bander, the original uploader of the BBC dub. ZP Bander gave some additional context about the dub's humor and info about the rip. First, about the PE teacher joke.
Now, unless you obey our instructions, we will have to employ this individual, Mr. Takahashi, our PE teacher.
I hope you got your kid.
Many British people remember physical education teachers as evil beings that just made us do tiring, repetitive, possibly demeaning or painful things without ever teaching us anything useful, and the kit refers to the change of clothes that would frequently be forgotten to be brought into school, resulting in some sort of punishment. Second, ZP mentioned chiropodist is a common word in the UK but can't confirm or deny the pronunciation. Lastly, ZP clarified the info about the mosaic effect when Lum loses her bikini. That was something added to the YouTube upload so it wouldn't get dinged for inappropriate content. The original broadcast kept it uncut. The zoomed in shot is ZP Bander's work as well before learning how to do the mosaic effect. Thanks ZP for all this helpful info. We've got one more stop on the globe before discussing the movies. I wanted to include this bit in part 1, but I couldn't find a good place to put it. I just couldn't resist talking about it. Our first stop today is Italy. We're going to rewind one more time to the 80s to talk about the Italian dub of Urusei Yatsura, titled Lamu, La ragazza dello spazio, which translates to Lum the Space Girl. Now, I'm pulling most of this info from Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt. I also do not speak Italian, but here's the gist of Urusei Yatsura's Italian dub history. Details are unclear about the original broadcast, but it is believed that it first aired in 1983. Either way, the first batch of 86 episodes was dubbed by Rickman Sound Studio. Episodes 87 to 129 aired on Telecapri starting in January of 1988 using a new dub cast from Video Recording SRL. And finally, episodes 130 through the finale saw a release years later in 2010 with yet another new dub cast, although some cast members of the previous dub were kept. Now, why the hell am I telling you any of this? If anyone knows anything about Italian anime dubs, it's that their openings are typically certified bops, and Urusei Yatsura is no exception. Specifically today, we're going to be analyzing the first Italian opening. This catchy upbeat opening, titled Come difficile stare, was sung by Ciro D'Amico and Noam Caniel. Despite being made for an Italian dub, this opening was not recorded in Italy. It was recorded 6,000 miles away in Los Angeles, California at Sound Connection Studio. What's more, the opening was composed by Shuki Levy and Haim Saban, the legendary co-founders of Saban Entertainment. Between the two of them, they have worked on the soundtracks for the English versions of Digimon, Power Rangers, Dragon Ball Z, and Hakushon Daimao, aka Bob in a Bottle, amongst dozens of others. But if you want to hear the full story on tracking down the info for this canzone fantastica, please watch this video by Justin Wang. The link is in the upper right corner as well as the description. Now let's get back right where we left off last time with the 6 films of Urusei Yatsura. Take it away, Abhi.
The second Urusei Yatsura movie, called Beautiful Dreamer, stands out for several reasons. When it was released in Japan, it was literally 1984, and director Mamoru Oshii was less than satisfied with his work on the prior film, Only You, saying it felt more like an extended episode than an actual movie. Meanwhile, Rumiko Takahashi liked Only You, and apparently considered this one to be a separate entity, probably related to the fact that Oshii didn't consult her at all while making it. Beautiful Dreamer's original script was having problems for a while and was eventually scrapped, so due to limited time, the crew was given carte blanche, leading to a more idiosyncratic kind of film, which you can learn more about in the commentary track and some other sources we'll go over. Beautiful Dreamer was also different on the English-speaking side of things. As mentioned in part 1, Central Park Media had actually beat Animegu at reaching out to Toho to acquire and release this film. The latter US company would actually work together with CPM on the subbed Beautiful Dreamer release for 1993, but the dub was a different story. According to ANN and the old release's copyright, this dub came out in 1996, though the new Blu-ray credits say 1993. Assuming it's the former, this means we're in between the Those Obnoxious Aliens dub and the BBC gag dub. It was produced in New York at a studio called Matlin Recording, whose other work includes certain parts of Patlabor, another franchise Oshii was involved in which has a dubbing history spread across several regions.
That unbelievable case where a thief stole a cargo trailer that had already been stolen?
Yes, that was Dan Green, but he's not the only children's card game player we'll be talking about today. In Beautiful Dreamer, Ataru, or Aturu as the Old English credits called him, was played by someone called Vinnie Penna, who also played Shutaro Mendo. This movie was actually Penna's first paid voice acting gig, as he mentions in an interview with Chris Mayak. Sometime after Beautiful Dreamer, he would start going under the pseudonym Wayne Grayson, meaning that this movie's voice for Ataru and Mendo later became the voice of
Joey Wheeler, the godfather of games, capiche?
Hey, hold it, the star makes his entrance. Thank you.
What the heck is that?
I was completely green and had no idea what I was doing technically. But what happened was the fellow who directed that saw I put in my resume that I did celebrity impressions and accents and dialects, and he foolishly assumed I had done voiceovers before, which I hadn't. But I wasn't going to dissuade him of that notion because I wanted to work. And it's hard to look at for me now and to listen to, but I was trying. And that's what really counts, right?
In Beautiful Dreamer, he ends up talking to himself a few times, which is funny seeing as how much his two characters have in common despite their different demeanors.
Hey, what's the matter, Mendel? Are you still mad at me?
Naturally. You made me an innocent victim of an electric shock. The tank's electronic components were completely reduced to scrap. Our nearly complete coffee shop was wiped out, and it's all your fault!
His Ataru sounded very sneaky and playful, as it should, with some shades of what would become Joey Wheeler. Meanwhile, his Mendo matches how pompous the character can sound in Japanese fairly closely, and I like to imagine it as a less evil prototype for the voice of Master Darts.
Speaking of whom, where is our fearless leader goofing off now?
Great deities of domination, I call upon thee. Use the Pharaoh's force to penetrate the dominion of the beasts and liberate the fury of 10,000 years.
Additionally, this somehow marks the second time an English voice of Ataru More-oboshi has gone on to be a Ninja Turtle in the 2003 series.
TMNT! What you get is what you see!
Lum's Beautiful Dreamer dub actress was Anne Ulray, better known by the pseudonym Roxanne Beck. Like Grayson, this was her first anime role, and I was able to ask her a few questions via email, where she said, "They wanted something very young and sweet sounding. When I was doing the dub, the director kept encouraging me to sound sweeter and more innocent. Out of all the dubs so far, I think she'd gotten the closest to sounding like Fumi Hirano's portrayal in the original Japanese."
I want to live happily ever after with Darling, his mom and dad, Ten, Shutaru, and Megane and all his friends.
She also mentioned that her new pseudonym is Roxanne Ray, and that she's now an LA-based screenwriter, pitching 2 TV dramas and an animated show. Well, at least back in October when I emailed her she said that. I don't know about now. Truth be told, Ataru and Lum don't actually have that many lines in this film compared to some other characters like Mendo and Sakura. She was played by Mani Head, who, like some other actors in this dub, has little to no other credits I could find. Sakura is a very stoic character. She has strong feelings, but isn't necessarily vulnerable, and unfortunately I don't think Mani had achieved that as well as the seiyuu. Occasionally decent, but usually either low energy or stiff.
You just ate too much, you idiot! Ouch! Release us from this dream world at once, and be gone!
Shinobu was played by Jeanette Ann Wallace, another name without any other listed roles.
What are you talking about? You just had lunch at the Hamma tea shop.
Regarding some actors having very few roles to their name, one factor might be pseudonyms. Obviously we know about Wayne Grayson and Roxanne Beck, and the latter mentioned to me that after joining the Screen Actors Guild, or SAG, she began using pseudonyms for non-union work. So that could potentially be true of other actors in this dub whose real names we don't know. For example, let's take a look at the voice of Onsen Mark in this film.
You know the feeling you get sometimes when you walk through a town you've never been to before, and you encounter a scene that feels like you'd seen it before?
The credits say T. Roy Barnes, but after looking into it more, I think this guy's name is Richard A. Rodstein, or at least one of them is. The other names he's gone under according to the internet include the following: T. Roy Barnes, Dick Rodstein, Alex J. Rose, Earl Groan, Baal Shem Tov, Carlo Brock, Lester Trunks, and Sham Figueroa Drumiode. Speaking of names, we should probably discuss Lum's stormtroopers, who in this film are played by these actors. This is the first dub where we hear the stormtroopers being referred to by name, but the names I just listed aren't the actual names of these characters. Those get revealed in the series proper, but for the most part, the stormtroopers are referred to by defining aspects of their appearance. It's maybe questionable as to whether the localization should have kept those words in Japanese, as to a Japanese viewer, they're just ordinary nouns. However, I've learned that when a localization doesn't change something for a long time, it just sorta sticks, for better or worse, so I wouldn't know what the best way to handle it nowadays would be. And since we don't have access to the full Animax dub, we can't know how it was handled there. Most performances in this dub are very smoothed over compared to the Japanese. It's more noticeable with a character like Sakura, but for as sold as I was on Grayson's acting, as well as some others like Rodstein as Onsen Mark, to varying extents the cast lacked a certain energy and sense of range that really made the emotions pop more in the original. Well, except for maybe Shinobu. Even the older male characters shriek with absolute insanity in the Japanese audio. But in the dub they sound like this.
More-oboshi!
Ryunosuke! Miss Ryunosuke disappeared.
Craig Woolman's performance as Megane wasn't the worst in the dub, but in the original Megane is played by Shigeru Chiba, a highly prolific actor in Japan. This might sound strange, but I feel like the only dubbed version of Megane that came close to the vibe Chiba brought to the table was the BBC dub. If you can look past how different some of his lines were, he really did capture that uptightness and idiosyncrasy.
That's it, Ataru! Scream! Scream so that Lum can hear you from her planet! We must begin our call for the aliens to return Lum.
Ironically, I think the best performance in this movie's dub was Matthew Ross as Chibi. His IMDb says he has experience behind the scenes on live-action productions in several capacities, but his delivery was natural, and he had a distinct sound that matched the character's appearance and the seiyuu. A pretty pleasant surprise for someone whose role was literally small.
We've got a real manpower shortage here. No wonder, considering how unpopular Ataru is.
Hey!
Detracting further from the performances with the mispronunciations, Beautiful Dreamer had some usual suspects like Ataru instead of Ataru, but special mention has to go to what Shutaro Mendo's name ended up as. Shutaru Mendao.
Shutaru?
Mendao.
Mendao.
Mendao!
Mendao. Mendao.
Mendao.
Mendao!
Something more concerning is the ones that were sometimes right and sometimes off.
Sakura. 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 Sakura.
Ryoko.
Ryoko! Ryoko!
What was going on with this dub? Roxanne Beck mentioned to me that they used the 3 beeps method to record Beautiful Dreamer, as was the case with all her VO jobs in the 90s. The ADR director is credited as Darren J. Hallinan, and the ADR writer is Leslie Allison, both of whom have nothing else to their name, anime or otherwise. Could this be more of the pseudonym shenanigans we discussed earlier? Actually, Grayson mentioned in the interview that the dub's director was Alan Gus instead. Alan Gus is credited as the audio engineer alongside Hallinan. Could they have been one and the same person, or was Grayson maybe misremembering after so many years? Keep in mind this dub is basically as old as me. Matlin's website currently mentions Ellen Gus on the front page and where he's gone, so given all of that, I wouldn't be surprised if he owned the place, although now it looks more like a piano tuning service. Regardless, Gus has actually been working on some of the recent Pokemon dubs. The dub script itself is very, very close to the subtitle translation, keeping the exact same wording almost all the time. It led to some goofs lip-sync-wise, but also hampered some of the delivery, other than some songs and poems which weren't supposed to sound amazing.
Leaving trauma beacon.
Can it? You really are tone deaf.
There was occasional rephrasing for the sake of flaps and retiming of the dialogue when the characters' mouths weren't visible, but that wasn't taken advantage of nearly enough, and the occasional janky audio splices didn't exactly help.
We have tons of things to do before tomorrow's opening.
And hey, you two girls hang in there, alright?
Perm, you think Flaky Tuna will be okay?
Of course, being literal to the subs 99% of the time makes the remaining 1% stand out more. A couple were just mistakes, like calling Ten a girl and mixing up Ron's name with Lom's early on. A bit of it is westernization of Japanese cultural aspects like food, currency, and pro wrestlers. But the most important thing in this department was mythology. Mamoru Oshii drew on one of Japan's best-known folktales, Urashimataro, but when first mentioned in this movie, the dub localized it as Rip Van Winkle, which is sort of a Western equivalent. Even the official subs make a note about this.
And when you finally come back, the inside is covered with dust and mushrooms, as if it were in ruins? Rather like Rip Van Winkle.
What makes this change kinda redundant is that literally one scene later, Onsen Mark explains the Urashimataro tale in detail and compares it to the unfolding plot. Even if non-Japanese viewers didn't know what Urashimataro was when Sakura introduced it, they'd only have to wait one scene for it to click, and it's mentioned constantly throughout the rest of the movie.
Urashimataro spent dreamlike days at the Dragon Palace, and when he returned to his beloved hometown, he found that hundreds of years had already passed there.
The only other notable change to the dialogue was something that wasn't quite censorship or mistranslation. The subtitles for this movie do have some mildly inappropriate vocabulary, and it's hard for me to say if those English words are one-to-one with Japanese equivalents, or we're just trying to capture the tone of a character's dialogue. Regardless, the dub dials that already mild language down further. Let go, you ass?
Let go, you idiot!
Damn your impudence, More-oboshi?
Blast your impudence, More-oboshi!
To hell if need be?
To purgatory if need be!
Actually, the removal of hell came up a lot. Was someone working on this dub a concerned parent or devout Christian? Personally, I think the offensiveness threshold was well and truly passed with the, World War II themed cafe in the second scene. And just to clarify, Oshii mentions in the commentary track that many of Urusei Yatsura's staff were military buffs. You may have noticed I haven't mentioned Mujaki so far. He appeared in the TV series briefly, but was redesigned and fleshed out into this movie's antagonist, and it seems he was also the antagonist of this dub and all the problems we've discussed so far. He was voiced in English by Dreidel Roberts, who played the principal earlier in the movie, and his only other credit is as strip joint announcer in the 1998 movie Mob Queen. I watched that movie, and this is the only moment that could be described as having a strip joint announcer. Guys, I think that was it. A single second of introducing a topless woman reading lines from an 1880s Norwegian stage play in a 50s Brooklyn strip club. In Japanese, Mujaki sounded relatively deep, elderly, and according to a friend of Yui's who's a native speaker, had a Kansai dialect. In the dub, it's almost like a clown voice. Imagine a younger Krusty before he started smoking.
確かに無邪気だすお初にどうも。しかし姉さん、弱いのこと知っとりまんな。
How do you suppose it would be if instead of just Taro, everyone in the village had ridden on the turtle's back?
The real problem with how Mujaki was dubbed was his monologues. Just because the line is directly translated from the Japanese doesn't necessarily mean it takes the same amount of time to say. In Mujaki's first monologue, there's actually 4 sentences that the dub excludes because it fell too far behind. Ironically, being too close to the subs led to entire lines being cut. Then there's the second monologue. I don't think Beautiful Dreamer is the worst of the Urusei Yatsura dubs, but this might be the worst moment across all of them. He starts by trying to dismiss the accusation of being the devil.
冗談じゃおまへんで、そらまああんさん方生身のお方たちより多少の術は心得とるし、だいぶ長を生きてはおりまっけどな。
But then pauses and realizes that he really does fit the bill.
そやな、これがくせもんなんやな、長を生きとるというのは。
But because the dub insists on being the subtitle translation word for word, it lags behind, and this realization now comes in the middle of a continuous sentence without that pause to punctuate it.
But still, oh, I see. My long lifespan makes me seem evil, doesn't it? Yeah.
Things don't get any better. The pause before he moves on to the next subject?
そのたんびにわてまた別の夢のかけら探して。
Happens in the wrong place in the dub.
When that happens, I look for a fragment of yet another dream.
His line about running here, there, and everywhere? The dub doesn't get to it till after his running animation is over.
Running here, there, and everywhere.
What about this profile shot where he takes up so much of the frame, dedicated solely to a line where he remembers encountering Lum, finally moving on from the 30 seconds he spent in the last shot just ranting and despairing?
Yeah,
the dub just steamrolls through it. It hardly matters that it's identical to the subs at this point, because it's the animator's intentions that are getting disregarded now. Eventually the dub just gives up and has Mujaki talk through obvious pauses, because why not at this point?
It got so I was thinking, if I quit making people dream and just disappeared, maybe that would make people happier.
None of the phrasing the Seiyu used to convey Mujaki's changing emotions made it through in the dub either. It's just a continuous drone of this clown voice with incredibly robotic cadence. If this dub wasn't as old as me, I'd assume it was AI generated, not helped by the weird noises in the audio as he talks.
Things are a mess for you 'cause you think time and space are objective things.
The worst part about all of this is that Dreidel Roberts doesn't seem like that bad an actor. He throws in little details here and there to make his delivery sound more spontaneous and genuine.
I'm Lum.
Miss I'm Lum. I mean Miss Lum. A nice name, sort of sweet, sort of bitter.
Which is a shame given how much the script and direction, or lack thereof, compromised his ability during the monologues. Stuff like this genuinely makes me wonder what was going on behind the scenes. Did they have to make this dub in a rush? At the end of the day, it was still interesting on a personal level to hear the first professional roles Wayne Grayson had ever done. The first episode of anime I saw in any language was the anchor duel between Yugi and Joey, so he's literally one of the first anime voices I ever heard. However, when it comes to the legacy of Beautiful Dreamer itself, I'm not sure if this dub has a whole lot to offer. The film is regarded as a milestone in Oshi's career just as much as it's a milestone for Urusei Yatsura. In the book Stray Dog, The Films of Mamoru Oshii, Brian Rue mentions some of its influence in his future work, ranging from visual motifs to entire concepts. Regardless, Oshii's time working on this franchise saw fans sending him threats and even raises, with Rue speculating that the depiction of Tomobiki as desolate ruins was a way of venting. In another interview, he actually mentions not being able to bring himself to love Takahashi's characters. For a dude who said that, I personally think his work on Urusei Yatsura was, kinda great. Another legendary director, Shinichiro Watanabe, has mentioned in several interviews that Beautiful Dreamer was one of the films that motivated him to get involved in the anime industry. Given how different the film itself was within the context of the Urusei Yatsura franchise, I'm okay with this film's dub being inconsistent with the other 5, even if it wasn't great. Speaking of those other films... So after this wild ride around the states and across the globe, we're actually back where we started, Wilmington, Carolina. This time though, Animego worked with a different studio, Swell Recording, founded by this bloke, Eric Tomasunis.
How you doing? I'm Eric Tomasunis. I have company Swell Recordings and Film, formerly Intune Music LLC.
According to their website, Swell was founded in 2001, although he mentions in the Maddox commentary that it was previously known as Intune Music, and that Maddox itself was their first dub recorded in 1995. You can find Tomasunis' name in credits as an ADR director, engineer, and voice guidance for their anime dubs, some of which are not for children, let's say. Now's probably a good time to distinguish between Kitty Films, which is the Japanese company involved with Urusei Yatsura's production, and Kitty Media, which is the US company that's distributed some of the stuff that Swell dubbed. At this point though, Swell has well and truly moved on from anime into general film production, and if it weren't for Tomasunis' name on their website, I would have thought this was all a mix-up with another company called Swell. Just to give a refresher from last time.
Well, in Wilmington where we live, it had a really big boom in the 90s for film and television stuff, and so there were a lot of really talented people here looking to break into that, and so it was easy to lure them with the idea of doing some anime.
That was Zach Hanna, a film and theater actor who'd done work at Swirl and who played the propane guy in the Southwind dub. In the time since that 2-episode dub was released, Dawson's Creek had come out and it was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina. As we'll see, a handful of actors in these movie dubs had roles on that show, and Swirl's website names Tomasunis himself as an ADR recordist on it. In a 2003 Anime Expo interview, Scott Carlson of Animego explained that they were looking for a new base of voice actors. He was able to look back fondly on the Southwind dub with its weird casting choices and accents, but also believed that dubs had come a long way since then in terms of talent, tech, and localization philosophy. Since we didn't want to relive the UI dub, we cast actors who could truly depict the characters. We wanted them to act the character instead of acting like the character. Yes, this meant abandoning accents and speech patterns. The end result is a solid dub. The home video release of the first movie came with some extras, including some of the audition tapes for these characters, which have since been uploaded to a YouTube channel called Ataru Lum. And in the Lum auditions, you can definitely hear the actresses using accents similar to what Martha Ellen Senzine did in the Southwind dub, despite what Carlson said.
Somehow I have this feeling we're not on the same wavelength.
I have something I want to give you. On my planet, they say these stones connect lovers' hearts together.
So I guess at some point they were going to keep it? Speaking of accents, you might notice in some of these auditions, and especially the behind-the-scenes features, that some of the folks working on these dubs had a bit of a Carolina accent that they tried toning down in the dub proper.
I don't learn all of my lines before I come in. I just go line for line. And
some auditions also had interesting pronunciations.
Ataru, More-oboshi.
The ones for L, Mendo, and Shinobu were mostly pretty lifeless, and some of the Meganes were wild.
Shut up!
Shut up! Shut up!
Shut up! Shut up!
Carlson said they were looking for two key attributes in the actors. One, being relatively unknown so that viewers wouldn't associate them with their prior roles, and two, being open to suggestions and criticism. Prioritizing new faces can definitely lead to a unique sounding cast, but in my mind it also has the downside of having to sort the undiscovered talents from the ones who are unknown because they don't have the acting chops. Auditions probably aren't meant to look for final product tier results. The director will guide their chosen actors in the recording sessions themselves.
Who is this L?
Who is this L?
Who is this L?
But yeah, I can see why these didn't make the cut.
We won't hesitate to use any means to ensure Lum's happiness.
Movie 1 called Only You was released in Japan the year prior to Beautiful Dreamer. As mentioned in the Scott Carlson interview, the dub was released in 2003. Another extraterrestrial girl named Elle is apparently engaged to Ataru due to a silly game they played as kids. She organizes a big wedding for her and Ataru, Lum tries to stop her, Ataru acts like Ataru, and the whole neighborhood gets caught in the middle of it. Going back to what Oshi said in the Beautiful Dreamer commentary, he wasn't the original director for Only You. However, since that director quit partway through, he stepped up and did what he describes as a rush job in 4 to 5 months. The film actually marks the first time a Simpsons character would cameo in anime. Here we can see Mr. Burns in the wedding audience. 6 years before The Simpsons debuted on TV. The two ADR directors for this English dub were the aforementioned Eric Tomasunis, who additionally served as the mix engineer, plus the actress that played Lum and Ten herself, Shannon Settlemyer. Apparently Shorty is her nickname.
the hardest thing about playing Lum, I would have to say, is when she freaks out because she has to scream at this very annoying high pitch.
Darling, you
Overall, it's one of the stronger performances in these movies. In prior dubs, we mentioned that Ten has sounded more like a kid than a baby, but this time, I think Settlemyer got it just right.
I hope you're miserable. I hope you're suffering. I hope you're in pain. I hope you're sad.
He's higher pitched and more annoying, which suits him perfectly. Is what I would be saying if Yui didn't point out that he sounds like Toad from Mario.
Here we go!
It seems that Settlemyer stopped working at Swirl at some point after these movie dubs and focused on dancing? That's what a comment on this interview from Madison Lanehart suggests, and Settlemeyer's LinkedIn page does mention dancing. Other cast members of this dub have obviously appeared side by side in other anime dubs from the Carolina region, like You're Under Arrest, Clam School Detectives, and others that aren't as safe for YouTube, but also in some live action shows from Carolina, such as One Tree Hill and Dawson's Creek as mentioned earlier. However, there is some other animation from other countries they would eventually go on to dub together. Settlemyer was one of those actors, but alongside her at times was our new voice for Ataru, still pronounced Ataru, Steve Rassin, otherwise known as the Rassinator.
Now that I think about it, I feel sorry for you because you fell in love with a guy like me.
He's done anime, cultured anime, some live action, but at the time of Only You's dubbing at least, Rassin had done improv for 10 years and was part of a troupe called The Comically Impaired, which is apparently Wilmington's longest running comedy improv troupe. Zach Hanna was also in that group. The value of Rassin's improv skill gets brought up a few times, and not just in regards to Urusei Yatsura.
Zach had talked about improving earlier, and I think that that's a great skill to have because oftentimes the written line does not match up to what's going on, and you'll still have the mouth moving. And if you can kind of capture the moment and continue with the thought, that will often help a lot, or sometimes you have to shorten it up.
Yeah, you know, I'd forgotten.
A lot of these guys are improv comedians, and that typically is an excellent trait to have when recording anime.
He is part of an improv comedy troupe, so he can make up a lot of the stuff by himself, and I don't have to feed him lines, so...
The Urusei Yatsura movies have very faithful dub scripts, so if anything, Rasen's improv ability helped with the delivery itself more often than the word choice, though there is a little of that.
She always cared only for me. Hey, this is pretty good.
On top of that, he made a great effort matching all the weird noises Ataru makes, while occasionally throwing some different ideas for delivery into the ring, resulting in the best performance in the cast.
Steve Rasen becomes famous and rules the world! All the women in the universe will be mine!
It looks like they got a relative of his, Cole Rasen, to play the young Ataru in this movie.
In 11 years, I'll be 17 years old. That's a long time.
Only Yu's main movie-exclusive character was Elle, played in the dub by Kristen Foster, who also played Lum's mother, who only speaks in an alien language.
Oh, how wonderful! Oh, you're so good!
There's only one non-Urusei Yatsura acting role of hers we could find, but it appears she's a publicist and makeup artist according to IMDb. As Elle, she had a slightly more down-to-earth sound than the Seiyu, but it still worked in the scenes.
This brings back so many memories. We first played tag just like this on that summer day 11 years ago. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I remember.
One criticism levied at both the dub and the movie itself is that there's too many characters, and not many of them shine. And with how the casting tried prioritizing lesser-known faces, I'm not fully sure I found the right actors with these given names, nor where to get more or even accurate info on them. However, since many of them will be in the rest of these movies, let's try banging through some of them quickly. Our new Shinobu is Daniel Sullivan, whose other anime roles include Blue Submarine No. 6 and several 18+ things. Mendo got the correct pronunciation for his name back and was now played by Brian Hudson. His IMDb self-bio says he's of German heritage, which is why he was chosen to play Lederhosen Guy in the movie Beer Fest. While the dub refers to Ataru More-oboshi with Western name order, for some reason they always say Mendo Shutaro, which is Japanese order, but why?
I, Mendo Shutaro, will settle this score like a man.
Megane, or rather Magane this time, is played by Colin Hackman, who by all accounts is a Wilmington-based meteorologist with no other acting experience, unless he has a pseudonym for you-know-what that I'm unaware of. Now for the new voice of Cherry, or should I say, the old voice, because this is Eric Paisley back from the Southwind dub playing the same character. Here he is on an episode of Dawson's Creek, which aired in 2001.
Nice to meet you, Paisley. Mr. Kublix told me all sorts of wonderful things about you.
Kurama and Sakura, sometimes pronounced Sakura, were both played by Daisy Talley, who seems to have more experience behind the scenes than with acting if the internet is anything to go by. Chibi is played by Stephen Paul, which is one of the most common sounding names in the world. So either IMDb and Wikipedia are very confused, or this is the guy who produced the Baby Genius movies, the live-action Tekken Bratz and Ghost in the Shell movies, or he's the guy who translates for Shonen Jump in English, i.e. probably not. Jamie Phelps played both Oyuki and the movie original character Babara. Again, very little info on her as an actress out there, but IMDb tells me this was a pseudonym for Jamie Rosengren. If that's true, then she's done a lot more work behind the scenes, and is currently working as an on-set dresser for Marvel movies?
It's so unfortunate that I couldn't attend Lum's wedding ceremony.
I am not Lady L. I am her nanny, Barbara.
Jerry Winsett plays Ataru's father, and thankfully, this guy's acting career across film, TV, and stage is very well documented.
When I started looping a film that I'd made called The 6 O'Clock News, and I thought, wow, this is pretty good. I get a day's pay for coming in here and just saying the lines that I screwed up on set, so that's not bad. And I met some other atmosphere actors and looping actors, and Guy actually got into voiceover through looping.
His anime roles include You're Under Arrest, Virtua Fighter, various adult anime under the pseudonym Jericho, and at least at one point, he was an executive board member for SAG-AFTRA's Washington Mid-Atlantic local. I was actually able to ask him a few questions regarding his time on these dubs. He mentioned these movies used the chase method for recording dialogue. It's a style of dubbing where the actor delivers their line as they hear the original audio, without being cued by something like the 3 beeps or a rhythmo band. Jerry found that Sewell was a more easygoing studio, but not necessarily in a good way. Coastal Carolina was more professional, supportive, and paid him on the same day, while Sewell still owes him money.
I tell you what I like most about Mr. More-oboshi is he reminds me in a way of Jerry Lewis. That's sort of what I have in the back of my head when I'm doing this, and it's fun to do that.
You and Lum have been living together for more than a year. Isn't it about time you two tied the knot?
He'd eventually meet other actors from this dub in different settings, including but not limited to working with Eric Paisley on stage, as well as the voice of Ataru's mother, Belinda Keller, who's been in a couple of other Carolina dubs, live-action things, and saucier voiceover things, fitting the pattern pretty well.
Who will take care of me when I'm old? Who will take care of me when I'm all alone?
Run's name was pronounced like the English word Iran, like in the Hong Kong dub, and was played by Caitlin Walker, another very common-sounding name for which IMDb gives several options and slight respellings.
I'm going to cry. It's too much to bear. Hey, listen to me!
The most interesting cast member I found was Natasha Malinsky, or Natasha Charles Parker, as Benten.
Ooh, wait, I got this one. According to her self-bio on IMDb, she moved from Pennsylvania to North Carolina for university, and in that time, worked as an intern on Dawson's Creek while doing anime dub work, that being just this one Urusei Yatsura movie and Vugi's Angels. However, after graduating, she would move to Singapore to voice Nico Robin and Vivi in the Odak/Voiceovers Unlimited dub of One Piece, and Kelly Kozuki and Lou in UFO Baby, aka Da Da Da. After that stint, she moved back to the US and did some dubbing work in New York, eventually focusing more on stage and live action work. One thing she's been in is Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, so yes, there is 1 degree of separation between Urusei Yatsura and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
You idiot! Isn't that why you have insurance? If you're in fear for your life, you shouldn't be in this business!
Sorry, had to take over because she's worked on some Southeast Asian dubs. Back to you, Abhi.
Jumping ahead a bit to how the dub was received, Ryan Matthews, writing for Anime News Network in 2003, gave kudos to Lum and Ataru's performances, but was critical of the minor characters sounding less and less distinct and good the less important they are. This is something that happens when you try to feature all the iconic characters spread across multiple episodes into one movie. Not only do they have to share the screen time among themselves, but the movie original characters too. Part of the characters not sounding distinct could come down to some of them being played by the same person, but even then, Ryan and I agreed that even Shinobu and Benten sounded a bit too close to one another.
I'm disappointed you forgot my voice.
Shinobu's actually barely in this movie, so it's hard to judge. But while she was definitely better than the auditions we heard, she also sounded pretty flat.
It's the same as the last time. When Lum first came to Earth, you said I was the only one. Then you cried on me when you got messed up for being so flirtatious.
Given that Megane was apparently played by a meteorologist with no acting roles, I'm tempted to say he was surprisingly good. Some of his moments had a similar appeal to dubs like Golden Boy or Great Teacher Onizuka, where the messiness felt kinda earnest.
But that doesn't really change anything.
It's over. My life is over.
But other times the messiness was just messy. Many minor and background characters also sounded consistently off, or at the very least goofy. Mendo's military men, kids at school, the military ladies on Planet L, or even the legion of hot guys who raid the wedding. Sometimes that can genuinely add to the comedy, but other times it's distracting.
George! Smash the wedding ceremony!
No! There's no way I'll be your second lover!
Ataru's parents fell on the brighter side of this goofy-sounding cast, and the scene where they're berating their son at home with Lum and Cherry was probably the best, most consistent-sounding part of the dub.
Hey, Ataru!
Like I said, I'm going to marry Elle.
That's what he says?
You worthless imbecile!
One thing Urusei Yatsura characters do is flip-flop between extremely different sounds to sell the comedy.
Oh, I am so happy to see you!
But,
As I stand in front of you, I fondly recall the time that we were together. Remember, Elle?
And while Steve Rassin was definitely able to pull it off as Ataru, Megane, Mendo, and Run had no such luck. Like the Beautiful Dreamer dub, it's very close to the subtitle translation, with the occasional small liberties or omissions. But this time it felt slightly more intuitive and more frequent when it came to making things more natural and matching the flaps a little better. Granted, one quirk that happened a couple of times is when the Japanese line would trail off just before a character was about to say something important, only for the audience to see the reveal themselves a little while later. In the dub though, they straight up revealed that info in the initial line.
If you were from here, we'll go back in time!
As usual, there's some references and linguistics that are just really hard to completely convey in English, ranging from wordplay about bigamy to Megane's allusions to post-World War II Japan. Even Rassin, who I've been praising a lot today, had to just push through that seemingly untranslatable maita maita tonari no jinja with comedic rambling. Even the liner notes are a bit vague on this, but according to Ahoba, who's a native speaker, it's kinda like the way we say "see you later, alligator" in English. Now for some miscellaneous notes about the sound design. This list isn't exhaustive, but the entire first scene after the opening credits is a collective dialogue of curious students laid over Ataru and Lum walking to school. While they were all boy voices in the Japanese audio, the dub had a couple of them be girls. It culminates in a chorus repeating the name L, and in the original they all congeal with this ominous echoing effect. dub has them saying it one by one.
L?
L?
L.
L?
L?
L.
L?
Maybe there was a deeper meaning behind the way the Japanese version did it? I don't know, it's Mamoru-oshi. There's a moment where the music ends earlier in the Japanese than the dub, a weird vibrating sound the dub removes, and a lack of clear effort noises from the hot guy army as they raid the wedding at the end. Fun facts. In his review, Matthews concludes, given the complex difficulties involved, this dub is about as good as I figure it possibly could be. It has problems, and I can offer some serious criticism, but when I imagine this dub with all its problems fixed, I hear a dub that's not significantly better, giving the dub a 2 out of 4. Or to put it bluntly, yeah, they could have done better, but I don't really care, Lamau. Not that I disagree with him though. It was overall a fun ride, but the frequency of the speed bumps reinforced the feeling that the dub wasn't structurally sound, carried by a few performers who went the extra mile and a safe script adaptation.
No, that's not fair. I love you with all my heart, honey.
Then what's with the refrigerator?
It was just flirting, a little like a hobby, something anyone might do. You yourself lived with that Oni girl, you might recall.
The scale is totally different. I didn't freeze her, for God's sakes. I mean, it's disgusting to call this flirting. It's absolutely unforgivable.
It's easy to criticize, but I found it hard to care, given some problems the original film had. I'm not saying everything needs to sound one-to-one with the Japanese to be good, but it's gotta stand up on its own if nothing else. But hey, this was just the first of 5 films that Swell would dub. Next is movie 3 titled Remember My Love, not to be confused with the Macross movie called Do You Remember Love. Here's what happens in this movie. Okay, there's more to it than that, but you can watch the weirdness for yourself. Remember My Love actually marks the anime debut of Bulma, beating out the actual anime adaptation of Dragon Ball. No, this is not a joke, unlike the Simpsons one. However, the dub introduced a number of recasts that would be in effect for the remainder of the movies. Mindo is now played by Robert Rogan instead of Brian Hudson, and according to him, Remember My Love was his first major voiceover project.
It's already been 5 minutes now. That's strange. I wonder where the magician and his assistant went.
He got closer to Mendo's uptight persona, but he also got a bit too close to the mic at times.
My first pet octopus.
Likewise, Daisy Talley was replaced by Karen McIntyre as Sakura, who seems to have done set dressing and production assistance at some point. They still couldn't get Sakura's style of delivery down pat, but I do prefer this voice for her, probably because she sounds like Daria.
There was no answer at the door, so we let ourselves in. How do you do?
We were born in this room, we grew up in this room, and we thought we would die here alone.
In a throwback to 2 dubs at once, Adrian Monte, who delivered Palm's Few Lines and Only You, was replaced with Jonathan Guggenheim, who played Palm in the Southwind dub. You may remember his iconic lines, "What are we gonna do?" and but he also voices this helper alien with a British accent.
In the case of Miss Lum, the records indicate that the orb was lost in transit by the Galaxy Mail Service, and so the course is recorded as destination unknown.
I wonder if they knew. Meanwhile, Natasha Malinsky was no longer Benten and was replaced by Satu Runa, who currently appears to be involved in on-camera acting, theater, writing, and directing. She was credited under a different name at the time, but I was able to confirm via email that both belong to the same person.
We know the curse exists, Ataru, but there's nothing else we can do about it. So I guess you'll just have to sit there and take it easy.
Caitlin Walker no longer played Run and was replaced by Morgan Jarrett, not to be confused with Morgan Garrett, who was also brought on to play Ryunosuke. Again, not sure if this is the same person as Morgan Grace Jarrett, but otherwise there's not a lot out there about her.
Hey, Lon! Let's check out the Marching Land. Ray will be there, so you should bring your darling too. Wow, I've never been to an amusement park before.
Kristen Foster is still here as Lum's mother, but also as the old lady and Oshima the transforming tanuki, or raccoon as per the dub and sub. Credit where it's due, she made sure all the voices were distinct, and she actually kept performing Lum's mother in the alien language in this movie, even though the original audio had her speaking Japanese now. Something interesting about Oshima is that the subs say she, but the dub says he. Oshima does first appear in the film as a circus girl, but back in episode 52 of the show proper, Ataru and Lum come across a transforming tanuki called Oshima, played by the same seiyuu. Everyone in that episode says he in the subs, so maybe this movie's dub was trying to be consistent with that translation? However, in terms of personality, the 2 tanukis are functionally separate characters.
As long as Master Ru's best servant, Oshima, that's me, is watching, you won't be going anywhere.
Ru the Magician was played by Justin Gia, who's more of an on-camera actor, though the movie mostly focuses on the younger Ru played by at-the-time child actor Mark Jones, and there's at least 15 of those on IMDb.
What do you mean, only a kid?
I have incredible powers!
Child actors aren't common in anime dubs, so while it was genuinely refreshing to hear a convincing sounding kid, the performance itself wasn't so convincing. Definitely not as bad as the child actors in the Yu-Gi-Oh dub, but not exactly on the level of Aaron Dismuke as Alphonse in FMA 2003.
No, that's no good!
His best delivery was probably a reaction to the big reveal at the end. It almost sounds like the kid's genuine reaction to reading it in the booth.
The examples they give these kids in Japan.
Lastly, Lala is played by Margaret Woodfield. That's it. I can't find anything else about her.
You and your friends were once living through moments filled with joy. But with Lum being gone, the law of causality has been completely destroyed.
In broad strokes, the performance and script are about the same as they were in Only You. Even with more lines, Shinobu's dub performance didn't grab me, other than the big scream again. And while Ran's new actress felt like a slight step forward, and Ryunosuke's dad sounded great for the few lines he actually had, Ben 10's new actress felt like a slight step back.
Oh, I was a fool to even ask you!
Lum's tendency to sound more explicitly emotional in the dub kneecapped a couple of intimate scenes in this movie though, and there are times where I think Satomaya pushed the squeakiness a bit too far.
How do you know my name?
It's tough to say because even the performances I thought were decent in this film like Lala felt like grading on a curve. Staying closer to the translation meant that stuff like Rue's Cutie Honey reference stayed intact for those who'd recognize it, but there were still some pretty difficult to adapt lines. Megane's joke about Ataru the hippo changing color is tricky, but also sounds like a dirty joke I heard in middle school out of context. Having said that, there was the occasional good one.
Holy hippo!
In Japanese, this line was baka kaba, baka meaning idiot and kaba meaning hippo, while also being each other spelled backwards. Some moments in these movie dubs use on-screen translation notes for context, but at one point, they squeeze the note into Lum's dub line.
Are you a raccoon too, or a fox? In Japanese folklore, both are tricksters.
Don't take me lightly.
This is called explicitation in translation theory, and it can work when it's not jarring. It feels kinda random in this scene, but that's just me. As for the technical stuff, once again there's a couple of moments where the dub didn't provide background voices to shots that originally had them. They also didn't seem to want the evil laughs to last as long as they originally did, leaving some shots empty. A lot of this story revolves around a theme park, referred to in the movie with the German word Märchenland, which the dub consistently pronounces like an English word.
Tomobiki Marchenland.
The film also has some English language songs, but they were actually recorded for the original audio. Something I can't not mention is this early scene on the boat. If you listen carefully, you'll hear a faint echo of the Japanese audio in the dub.
確かに梅地を見忘れはしない。忘れるものか。お前の背中のその梅吹雪。It is you, Michio. How could I ever forget you? How could I ever forget the cascade of plum flowers on your back?
This time around, Ryan Matthews was a little more positive, stating he could sense some improvements in performances like Megane, but was split about the portrayal of children in this dub. He praised the unnamed doll in the opening, which according to him was dubbed by a relative of Eric Tomasunis himself, but was mixed on Mark Jones's performance of the more subtle lines, and disliked the child versions of the stormtroopers being played by their grown-up actors, even though that's what the Japanese side did. Overall, this dub improves upon Only You as I'd hoped. The main characters are a little better, and the incidental characters are a lot better. If you didn't like the first dub, it's worth giving it another shot. Still 2 stars though, which again, I agree with. These movies are an interesting part of Urusei Yatsura's English dub history, but not the most polished, although that could apply to all the dubs we've talked about so far. For now, I'll pass the mic to Yui to run down the rest of the Carolina movie dubs, and leave you with whatever this is.
Continuing our talk about the North Carolina dubs of the Urusei Yatsura films, we get another fantastical work, Lum the Forever. Originally coming out on February 22nd, 1986 in Japan, it was dubbed into English once again by Swirl Films and released in the United States on October 5th, 2004. When this movie first came out in America subtitled, Animego had only released roughly 20% of the anime, meaning any die-hard fans only following official releases may have been lost when certain characters popped up. This would also be the case for movie 5. In this film, Lum and crew are recording a horror movie. During filming, Ataru cuts down a sakura tree at the insistence of these cursed villagers, and of course, things go awry. After filming, Lum gradually becomes weaker and weaker to a point her horns fall off, and people begin forgetting she even existed. If she doesn't get her horns back, she runs the risk of her existence being erased. Every dub cast member returns for this movie. Abhi said his opinion on the main cast already, but I'm gonna toss in my 2 cents. this cast is okay. It's nothing to write home about. The direction does none of the Carolina dub movies any favors, and a lot of the time, the dub just sounds like a high-tier fan dub. 2 out of the 3 movies to follow basically copy and paste the subtitle script except for lip flaps, timing adjustments, and occasionally substituting Japanese phrases with English equivalents. This leads to lip flaps that are mostly fine. In short, I think these Carolina dubs are average. Dubbing has come a long way since these movies were released. It's not exactly high praise to say this is the best Urusei Yatsura dub so far. So, moving to the actual dub analysis. While everyone on the main cast returned, more recurring characters from the series made their silver screen debuts in Lum the Forever. Tobimaro Mizuno Koji, longtime rival of Shutaro Mendo, is played by Scott Whiteside. Whiteside doesn't have any other credits to his name, but these days he is an artist and paralegal assistant, returning to North Carolina in 2010. Tobimaro's sister, Asuka, is played by Margaret Woodfield, and Mendo's father is played by Sean O'Rourke. We discussed Margaret Woodfield already, as in movie 3 she played Lala. Sean O'Rourke is still in the acting biz. Previously he was Ricky in Crusher Joe, Haruo in Maddox, and various roles in heavily not okay to talk about on YouTube dubs. According to his IMDb, he does a lot of transportation work, but he's also been an actor in One Tree Hill and Stranger Things. Pretty cool. Ray doesn't show up in this film, but his voice actor in these dubs, Jeremy Griffin, is the voice of the principal. And lastly, Onsen Mark is played by Bradley Evans. Just like other films, I'd say 95% of the script is copied and pasted from the home video subtitles. The one major change I noticed is the dub changing Ataru saying Oshiruko to sushi. The script also changes a couple Japanese sayings to an English equivalent. Thankfully, there aren't many moments that are completely lost in translation, just a few general notes that may be overlooked. I recommend checking out the liner notes by Animego for more details. Link is on screen and in the description. There's not much I can say about this Carolina movie dub that hasn't been said about the previous 2. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just serviceable, as will be the next 2. We're finally here. The final chapter of Urusei Yatsura. The end to... I'm joking, this is not the end yet. Urusei Yatsura carried on a little bit longer after this final chapter debuted. The reason it's called the final chapter is, unlike every other film in the Urusei Yatsura lineup, this one adapts chapters from the manga, specifically the last 11, making this movie canon to the story. This film came out in Japan on February 6, 1988, and the dub debuted on DVD on December 7, 2004. In movie 5, it turns out Lum's grandfather made a promise that if he had a granddaughter, he would marry her to a merchant from the world of darkness that helped him. Well, said merchant has come into the picture, traveling to the world of light to fulfill that deal, and Lum ain't having it. Lum is forced into a marriage with the merchant's great-grandson. The movie feels like a bookend to the start of the series, as it ends in a game of tag much like how the series started. However, the stakes aren't just the fate of the Earth, although that's still hanging in the balance. Should Ataru fail, the Earth will become overgrown with mushrooms and everyone's memories of Lum will be erased as if she was never there in the first place. I'm gonna sound like a broken record. Every main character retains their respective voice actors from previous Carolina films, but as expected, more characters pop up for this movie. Rupa is voiced by Mike Yeager. Voice-wise, he was in Classroom of Atonement, but most of his other roles are janky CG crap like Agent Fox and Police Patrol. Rupa's grandfather, Upa, is performed by writer and filmmaker Angus Hovorez. This is Hovorez's first and only voiceover role, and in fact is one of his only acting roles period. Hovorez is most often a writer. Funnily enough, he's written and directed some of the live-action films that have featured a few other Carolina dub cast members. Carla is played by Christy Murdoch under the pseudonym Brayden Avery. A woman of plentiful previous pseudonyms like Christy Hatzell and Christy McCamey, she's still acting to this day, mostly in live-action works. Her anime credits are limited, also appearing in other Carolina dubs like Clamp School Detectives and You're Under Arrest. And lastly, Inaba is played by Jonathan Soronin, a mostly live-action actor who has also played a handful of characters in You're Under Arrest. Unlike the last movie, this film doesn't strictly stick to the subtitles, but is still accurate. This gives the dub some more wiggle room for the flow of the script. Pronunciations continue to be the same situation as movies so far, although I can add on 2 more. Inaba is Inaba, and Nabe is Nabi. Speaking of Nabi, this dub has cultural notes on screen for certain lines, all carried over from the official subtitles. The on-screen notes explain the foods nabe and takoyaki, as well as the Japanese saying that lovers are connected by a red string. After all that struggle and destroying much of the town, Lum stays on Earth, determined to make Ataru confess his love. But this is not the end of Urusei Yatsura yet, as we have one more movie to talk about before we end this chapter of Urusei Yatsura's English versions. For real this time, we're at the end of the Carolina movie dubs. Advertised as Urusei Yatsura's 10th anniversary special in Japan, Urusei Yatsura Always My Darling released in theaters on November 2nd, 1991 after a film festival screening on August 18th, 1991. The English dubbed version came out on home video on January 11th, 2005. In this last run for the Urusei Yatsura crew, our ever-lustful Ataru is abducted by aliens. Of course, he falls for this because the alien princess that captures him is smoking hot. And that's exactly why she needs Ataru. Only the most lustful person in the universe can help her obtain the most potent love potion in the universe. Her end goal? The heart of her one true love, a tofu card owner. The lead dub actors returned for one more show. Except for one. Morgan Jarrett didn't reprise her roles of Ryunosuke and Ran in this final film. Those roles went to existing actors on the cast, with Ryunosuke going to Jamie Phelps.
Somehow even I don't feel right about this, you know?
And Ron going to Christy Murdoch.
Say, Lum, where is that love potion now?
As for movie-only roles, the alien princess Lupica is performed by Jessica Miller, yet another name that yields many results online. And turns out, is a pseudonym for, what's this? Jessica Madison, another name that yields many results online. Looking at her IMDb, let's look at her website. Okay then, I don't think this is the same Jessica Madison. I can't show that on YouTube. Archive.org to the rescue? That's better. Madison has done more than her IMDb list, although I'm pretty sure these films listed are all independent as I can't find them online. Cool that she was a double for Sarah Jessica Parker in Smart People though. The humble tofu salesman and Lupica's crush Rio is voiced by Tony Moore. Like many other actors in these movies, Urusei Yatsura is his only voice acting credit. The dub script goes back to relying on the original subtitles practically word for word. Weirdly, the translator spiced up the subtitles by sprinkling in swear words throughout the dialogue. While the subtitles use words like shit and bitch, the dub doesn't go beyond hell and damn. The dub did make a line that's an abbreviation of a phrase with a bad word. The dub writers changed "you're out of luck" to "you're SOL. Unrelated to profanity, seconds after that line, the dub changed "what's over there" to
"Look, it's Godzilla!"
It's a shame the dub didn't do more of that. Just like previous movies in the series, the dub has on-screen cultural notes like the subbed version, this one defining natto. That stuff is easy to work with, but wordplay is another story. There's some wordplay in this movie, and much of it doesn't translate to English. I really like what they did in the subtitles for a joke later in the movie where Lupica meant to say Mizu, but accidentally stammers Mimizu. Mizu is water, and Mimizu is earthworm. There is no translating this joke. So while the dub doesn't adapt it, the subs play off her stammering by having Rio misunderstand it as water. Doubly funny is that the subs slap on a trademark symbol, because a trademark symbol makes everything funnier. Otherwise, there's not much else to note. Like every other film dub in this lineup, it's passable. And that does it for the Urusei Yatsura movie dubs. They kinda went out on a whimper, not that they made much of a storm to begin with. It doesn't help only 3 of the 6 Urusei Yatsura movies rank above a 7 on most aggregate anime rating sites, but even Met Productions can have great dubs. I've lost count of how many dubs and projects we discussed. We've been on a trip around the world only in the span of 2 episodes. I think the only other franchise I've discussed before that's had so much globetrotting is Doraemon. So before we move on, let's recap the story of Urusei Yatsura in English so far with a timeline of highlights, just so we're all on the same page. On screen now is a timeline of events in chronological order, from the TV series' debut in Japan to the final DVD released by Animego in America. The good news is Urusei Yatsura's fans have been treated well as far as subs go, since every episode received an official release thanks to Animego's dedication to the series. Dubs, not so much. 2 short-lived dubs, one being regarded as crap and one being a parody, and then one that is complete but barely available online. Then dubs of the 6 movies, one being by a different studio than the other 5, that are widely regarded as just being okay, myself thinking so too. There hasn't been a solid, widely available dub of Urusei Yatsura yet, wink wink. There are a few more notes to make before we reach the end. Animego's rights to Urusei Yatsura expired on September 30th, 2011. This means the company would be discontinuing distribution after this date, only selling through their existing stock. Discotek Media announced they had rescued the license for movie 2 on August 13th, 2016, then released it remastered on Blu-ray on February 27th, 2018. Throughout the years since, Discotek has released all the movies, the latest one coming out November 29th, 2022. Urusei Yatsura's movie releases show how much Discotek likes to put into their releases and how much the Japanese side has its say on what others do with the property. First off, the licensor made Discotek use 16:9 aspect ratio for each movie instead of the standard 4:3 found on older releases and current streaming platforms. However, the licensor did allow the team to color correct movie 1, Only You, since the Japanese releases appear dull. Additionally, Discotek's release of Only You is the director's cut, which has several minutes of extra footage not found in the theatrical version. The theatrical version is what's available on the Japanese Blu-rays, so objectively speaking, the Discotek release is better. What's more, every Urusei Yatsura movie has its English dub track too. Lastly, as much as the staff wanted to, Discotek was not allowed to include bonus features on these movie releases. At least they're easy to find online. But we're not done talking about Discotek yet. Discotek announced at Otakon 2022 for their One More Thing that they picked up the license for the Urusei Yatsura TV show. How did the audience react to this?
I lost my poise!
As for details, the subtitles are based on the original Animego scripts, and the team even had help from Animego co-founder Robert Woodhead to transfer the subtitles to Discotek sub format. Once again, due to licensing obligations from Japan, there will be no bonus features. This time though, that includes dubbed content. According to Mike Toole, extras were out of the question from the beginning, as much as Discotek would have loved to include the TV series dub material. Discotek released Part 1 on April 25th, 2023. Part 2 will come out on July 25th, 2023, with future release dates remaining TBD. On the manga side of things, Viz Media just released the last volume of the Urusei Yatsura manga. In a case of better late than never, they released Volume 17 on February 28th, 2023, making the full manga available officially in English. Finally, on to the last topic. If we released this video earlier this year, this would be the end, but we're not done. There's one last dub to talk about before we wrap up. In Urusei Yatsura English Dub History Part 1, we mentioned that Urusei Yatsura's 2022 reboot anime would be receiving a dub produced by Sentai Filmworks in Houston. That announcement came out on October 28th, 2022. At the time, Sentai hadn't even posted a cast list, let alone a release window. Months went by and fans grew curious, some even speculating they were getting the BBC cast back. Well, the dub's cast list finally dropped on February 27th, 2023, with the dub rolling out 2 days later on March 1st. As of writing, the dub is coming out on a weekly basis every Wednesday at noon Central Standard Time, with the last episode set to debut on August 2nd, 2023. To give some context about the 2022 anime, since we skimmed over it in episode 1, this anime is like a best of compilation of the Urusei Yatsura manga, adapting various chapters of the series in high definition and a new art style. It's a fun treat for older fans and a great introduction for newer fans. The second part of this anime will be releasing in 2024. In the Japanese version, the main cast received new voice actors, although the original voices of Ataru and Lum now voice Ataru's dad and Lum's mom respectively. Since Urusei Yatsura has been passed around to just about every major dubbing locale in America, save for Texas so far, this isn't a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood situation where the team can just rehire old actors. Most of the actors from the older dubs that are still in the biz don't live anywhere near Texas. And no, Sentai didn't rehire the BBC team. That would be ridiculous for innumerable reasons. Before we get into the cast list, spoiler alert, this is my favorite Urusei Yatsura dub cast so far. This ensemble has what other dubs didn't: proper direction. Some voice actors in prior dubs were good or at least had potential, but weren't given a chance to shine because the direction didn't support them. Some actors in previous dubs were also just plain miscast, but so far, no cast member feels out of place for the recent dub. Additionally, the direction helps the cast carry that chaotic energy Urusei Yatsura is known for. This dub also has one more thing over previous outings, an experienced dubbing studio. Given there is an 18-year gap between the last American Urusei Yatsura dub and this new one, the dubbing scene is entirely different. Dubbing is down to a science these days, and studio production values and quality checking are on another level compared to 2005. I mean, just listen to a clip from the first few minutes of episode 1 and it's a night and day difference between any other dub so far.
What's all the fuss about?
I know you've got your eyes on other girls, Ataru.
Hold on. Did you catch that?
I know you've got your eyes on other girls, Ataru.
Did they just...
Ataru, 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 Ataru.
After 28 years, there is finally a dub that says Ataru correctly. Granted, the dub says Shinobu and a few other character names like that, but I'll take those over Ataru. We take those W's. At last, the moment you've all been waiting for, the latest voice actors to portray the beloved Urusei Yatsura cast. Leading us off here, Jade Kelly is the latest voice behind the lead Lady Lum.
So, I take it this guy is my opponent. Hiya, my name's Lum.
As of this recording, she is working on a Lum cosplay. Keep up with her project on her Instagram and Twitter, at jade.kelly8 and at jade_kelly8 respectively. The luckless ladies' man Ataru More-oboshi is performed by Nathan Wilson.
Don't worry about it. This thing is called a ribbon, see? It's an accessory that girls on Earth wear to look cute.
Ataru's girlfriend and the third point of this love triangle, Shinobu Miyake, is voiced by Kat Thomas.
Get a room. No one wants to see you two like that. It's gross. Meanwhile, he's never bothered to give me a single bobby pin. Screw you and your stupid ribbon!
Lum's hot-headed childhood friend Ran is voiced by Donna Bella Litton.
Drop the act! Listen, I came here for one thing, and that's divine revenge! Screw all this sappy bullshit about old friends and fond memories!
Instead of Ran calling Lum Lumchan like in Japanese, the English version has Ran say Lumipu. I can't believe I am saying this, but I'm doing a voice actor profile for a VTuber. This truly is 2023. Lum's fire-breathing cousin Tane is voiced by the independent VTuber Koki Saporana.
Our first stop will be a cafe. Then we'll go see a movie.
Sure, that sounds good.
What a happy day. I'm on my first date.
Now let's get into the guests I got to interview for this video. Here's guest number 1.
Hi, my name is Jack Stansbury. I'm a voice actor in all sorts of things, but especially anime.
The voice actor of the cash-rich, claustrophobic Casanova Shutaro Mendo in this dub is Jack Stansbury.
Don't pay any mind to it. Madame, please smile. Being in your presence is all I can ask for. I'm honored.
If you want to hear the full interview, check the link in the upper right corner of the video, the description, or my channel's videos. And yes, we do discuss the famous cave scene in the interview.
It's so dark and cramped! I'm so scared! We're gonna die!
And here is guest number 2.
Hey, I am Brianna Roberts. I am a voice actor. I'm primarily known for my work in dubbing anime into English, but I also do all sorts of other things, video games, commercials, whatever, have voice will work.
Dallas-Fort Worth-based actress Brianna Roberts makes her debut in a Sentai dub playing the beautiful priestess Sakura.
That's because I've raised a barrier. It's all part of the exorcism. It'll be quick. Just keep on doing your back and forth thing in the ring.
Roberts has had lots of fun voicing Sakura. She stated the chant in episode 2 is one of the most fun recording sessions she has ever had. Just like Stansbury's interview, look out for the full interview with Brianna Roberts on my channel. There are a lot of actors on the supporting cast of this dub, but a few on the list include David Wald, John Swayze, Rob Mungle, Chaney Moore, Kyle Colby-Jones, and Scott D. Forsyth. And Urusei Yatsura 2022's English dub is directed by Shannon D. Reed, who made this promo image to announce his involvement. Reed has a solid resume of projects, and Urusei Yatsura has quickly become one of his gold stars. Here are special shoutouts to the Urusei Yatsura fans out there from both actors I interviewed.
Thanks so much for watching. We're having the times of our lives making it. It's such a fun show. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you continue enjoying it. And thanks for tuning in.
Just keep supporting the show and the dub. Show your love online for it. I would love to meet fans in person. So if you have a convention that's near your local area, request me or Jack or whoever, Jade, and hopefully we can all get there and meet up. I still haven't met anyone in the cast since I live in Dallas, and most everyone else lives in Houston. So I'm hoping to one day actually get to meet in the flesh everybody.
Thank you so much to these actors for their help. Like the movie dubs from the 2000s, there are cultural notes on screen for jokes and sayings that don't make sense in English, such as Cherry's chant for warding off lightning in episode 2. Also like the movies, this English dub generally leans on the subscript's flavor. However, it still feels like a dub script. Episode 3 is a great example of what I mean. The script uses Ridonkulous and Do Me a Solid, and I figured those were exclusive to the dub. But nope, I checked the subs and both are used there as well. Sometimes though, the dub will go out of its way to add a little bit more to a scene, like in episode 9 with anime Garfield Ray's debut. When the girls are giving him lunch, in Japanese he says domo over and over. But in the dub he switches it up and says things like gracias. I find little touches like that amusing. Other times, the ADR director may step in to fill in a couple flaps. This happened specifically in the chant Sakura does in episode 2, where they had a few flaps left over and threw stuff in like with soy sauce. Unfortunately, and inevitably, some jokes are lost in translation, gags that can't be explained away by on-screen notes or taking liberties to adapt them. One such instance is in episode 5. The love letter the boys in class write to Ataru is signed by a girl named Otoko Kumino. To English speakers, it's just a name, but in Japanese name order, Kumino Otoko sounds like a group of guys. Urusei Yatsura has long been called an undubbable show because of these kinds of jokes. While things go missing from one language to another, the on-screen gags, lovable characters, and fun stories go beyond language barriers and make this a blast to watch. Then again, I suppose all of this could be said about Gintama. Besides, there are some things that can only be done in English. This dub staff is knowledgeable of the Western Urusei Yatsura fanbase, and this becomes obvious in the same episode as the Otoko Kumino joke. Check out the moment when Otoko Kumino walks into the cafe.
Sorry to keep you. Nice to meet you. I'm Otoko. Hi. Oh my gosh! I've dreamed about being in your arms and now it's finally come true.
You heard that right. Lum in this scene is using a British accent, a loving nod to the fan favorite BBC 3 dub. Kelly tweeted the team felt they absolutely had to include a BBC reference and are now thinking of other nods as well. What could this entail? A small cameo by now dubbed veteran Michael Sintra-Nicholas? A character that has an accent like Martha Ellen Sensini's Lum? A random Sesame Street reference? I guess we'll see in the coming months. I've said before, being the best English dub of Urusei Yatsura isn't a high bar to clear, but this one is leagues beyond anything prior. It's well performed, it's hilarious, and it feels like a lot of care was put into its production. It's a true showcase of how far dubs have come in the past 20 years and how big a following this romantic comedy has in the West. Urusei Yatsura has one of the most complex English language release stories we've looked at so far. This adventure took us to every major anime dub hub in the United States and a few other places in the country, from the first Italian opening being recorded in Los Angeles, to the short-lived anime dub and multiple movies dubbed in North Carolina, to Movie 2's dub produced in New York, to the latest version being dubbed in Texas. But we went beyond that in our journey, as we also stopped in the UK and Hong Kong. None of this is even mentioning the extensive period of time the folks at Animega released an official English subbed version for the TV series and films from 1992 to 2006. Despite the struggles of any official releases, Urusei Yatsura has always had a hardcore fanbase abroad. Even before Animega began subbing the series, fans were experiencing Lum's misadventures on import recordings at club events and bootleg VHS tapes at specialty stores and anime conventions. It never aired on TV in America other than PBS in San Jose briefly, and it never came out in movie theaters. It organically became a must-watch by nerds. It stands up to the title to this day, an iconic rom-com classic and influential hit. Some of Rumiko Takahashi's other works became even bigger hits in America, with Ranma 1/2 and Inuyasha finding huge success among anime fanatics, but Lum & Company have held a special place in American anime culture since their debut. Now that the classic anime is receiving a Blu-ray set by Discotek, the movies are readily available to watch on many platforms, the manga is professionally translated in full, and the latest version of Love and Friends' Adventures has a sub and dub release, I'd say this is a happy ending to a rocky story. If you would like to experience Urusei Yatsura for yourself, you have several ways to do it. Please note this information is accurate as of May 2023. For the classic TV series, buy the Discotek sets when they release. Part 1 is out now, with further parts on the way. Alternatively, you could shell out the money for the older Animego releases, although that will be quite expensive. The 1981 series has yet to be made available on streaming. The movies are available on Blu-ray by Discotek and on the secondhand market on DVD and VHS, with varying degrees of dub availability. If streaming is more of your style, you can watch them on Crunchyroll and Retro Crush, sub and dub. For the Southwind dub, well, why? But if you are that curious, either buy the VHS set or Google it. For the BBC dub, it unfortunately never got an official release, so again, Google it. It's not hard to find. For the Hong Kong dub, you could say it with me, Google it. It's out there. Well, a small fraction of it's out there anyway. If the Japanese side wasn't so stingy, these dubs could have been made available from Discotek. But alas, it is what it is. The latest Urusei Yatsura anime is available to stream on HiDive in both sub and dub format. The dub is coming out on a weekly basis. Since it's so new, there is no home video release yet, but no doubt will be in the future. And lastly, if you want to read the manga, then Viz Media has you covered, as it's available both physically and digitally across 17 volumes. Hey all, Post-Edit Yui here. Of course, since I recorded this video, Viz has released a subscription service in certain markets for $2 a month to read basically as much manga as you want. I think it's like 100 chapters a day. And on that list is Urusei Yatsura. So if you're looking for a quick, cheap, and easy way to read the manga, give that a look. Urusei Yatsura is timeless. It took several decades, but English speakers can finally see all of Lum, Ataru, and their friends' escapades for themselves. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave in the comments what did you think of the English versions of Urusei Yatsura? When did you first discover this classic franchise? What else should I cover in this series? I'm always listening to your suggestions, and Urusei Yatsura was a popular one. I hope the wait was worth it. This video took ages to complete. That's why I'm grateful to Abhi of the Cartoon Cypher for finding the time to help me on this monstrous set of videos, especially when he's hard at work on his videos about dubs and unions with AJ. Go check them out. youtube.com/@thecartooncypher. I'll let Abhi have some closing notes too.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me, Yui. Each of Urusei Yatsura's dubs has its own goofs, but they were all fun to listen or re-listen to. It was also eye-opening researching how foundational both it and Animego were for anime in the US in general. A lot of that came from Coop Bicknell's article called Urusei Yatsura Remember My Subs, which you should check out if you want to learn more.
If you haven't heard what's coming next, stay tuned until the very end of the video. I'm sincerely hoping that the next video doesn't take on a life of its own like Fullmetal Alchemist, K-On!, and Urusei Yatsura did, because my god, I need to have some less story-rich videos for a little while. In any case, shout out to all of my supporters on Patreon and Twitch. Supporters on either platform got to see this video early, so if you'd like to support what I do, gain access to my exclusive Discord server, and have your name on screen here, please consider supporting. And special thank yous go to everyone that donated during Extra Life 2022. Andrew Bergman, Cybershroom, Janet L, Joe D, Matt, Project Scion, Straw Hat Ryan, and everyone else that donated during the event. Until next time, take care.